My name is Erica, and at 57 years old, I never expected to be sleeping in my own attic. 8 years ago, I won $14 million in the lottery, but kept it secret from everyone, including my daughter Amanda. I continued living in my modest home, driving my old car, and maintaining my simple lifestyle. Little did I know that my own daughter would one day force me into the dusty attic of the house I owned outright. Everything changed when she discovered my hidden fortune. Before I tell you how my own daughter treated me like an unwanted guest in my home, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button to join me for more real-life stories. Life before my lottery win was what most would call ordinary, but challenging. 12 years ago, my husband Thomas died suddenly of a heart attack while mowing our lawn. One minute, he was pushing that old mower across the grass, and the next our neighbor was pounding on my door. The paramedics tried everything, but he was gone before they reached the hospital. At 45, I became a widow with a teenage daughter to raise on my own. Our home in the suburbs of Minneapolis wasn't anything special, but it was ours. Thomas and I had purchased it 25 years ago, when Amanda was just a baby. It was a modest 2-story house with 3 bedrooms, a small backyard, with a maple tree Thomas planted when we moved in, and walls that had seen both tears and laughter over the decades. As a nurse working night shifts at Riverside Memorial, I managed to keep us afloat financially after Thomas died. The life insurance paid off most of our remaining mortgage, and my salary covered our basic needs. But there was never much left over for luxuries. Amanda never went without necessities, but she knew we had to be careful with money. "Mom, everyone at school has the new iPhone," she complained during her junior year of high school. "Honey, your phone works just fine," I responded, feeling that familiar twinge of guilt mixed with frustration. "Maybe for your birthday we can look into an upgrade, but not the newest model." These conversations happened regularly. I wanted to give Amanda everything, but teaching her financial responsibility seemed equally important. I worked extra shifts to put away money for her college fund, often coming home exhausted, but satisfied that I was doing right by my daughter. Then came that Tuesday in April 8 years ago. I stopped at Johnson's corner store to buy milk on my way home from a 12-hour shift. On impulse, I purchased a lottery ticket, something I rarely did, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. That night, while Amanda was studying at a friend's house, I sat at our kitchen table with a cup of tea and checked the numbers on my ticket against the drawing on my laptop. I had to check 5 times before I believed it. All 6 numbers matched. According to the website, the jackpot was $22 million. My hands shook so badly I spilled my tea across the table. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. After cleaning up the spill in a daze, I called the lottery office the next morning from a private room at the hospital during my break. They confirmed what seemed impossible: I had won. After taxes, my take-home amount was just over $14 million. The lottery officials explained I could remain anonymous in our state if I claimed the prize through a trust, which I immediately decided to do. But why keep it secret from my own daughter? 6 months before my win, a coworker at the hospital had won a much smaller lottery prize, just under $100,000. She made the mistake of telling everyone. Within weeks, her car was vandalized, distant relatives appeared with sob stories, and her son suddenly had friends who needed loans for business ventures. Her previously happy family was torn apart by arguments over money. I watched her transformation from a content, hardworking nurse into a stressed, suspicious woman who eventually transferred to another hospital to escape the chaos. I decided then and there no one would know about my winnings. Not my friends, not my coworkers, and not even Amanda. At 19, she was just starting college and figuring out who she was. I feared what sudden wealth might do to her development, her ambition, and our relationship. Instead, I contacted Robert Winters, a financial advisor recommended by the lottery office. He helped me set up a trust, invest the majority of the money conservatively, and create a plan that would allow me to maintain my lifestyle with only minor improvements. "You're different from most winners," Robert told me during one of our meetings. "Most people want to spend immediately. Mansions, sports cars, luxury vacations. I shrugged. I don't need those things to be happy. Security is what matters to me. I continued working as a nurse until my regular retirement 3 years ago. The only changes I made were subtle. I paid off our mortgage, completely upgraded our ancient furnace, got comprehensive health insurance, and set up automatic monthly donations to the local food bank and animal shelter. To anyone looking from the outside, I was simply a careful saver approaching retirement. Meanwhile, Amanda was changing. During her college years at the state university, we grew increasingly distant. Her calls became less frequent, and when she did call, she often mentioned her new boyfriend Steven, a business major from a wealthy family. "Mom, you should see Steven's parents' house," she gushed during one call. "They have an indoor pool and a home theater. His dad owns like 3 car dealerships." "That sounds lovely, honey," I replied, feeling the first hints of a gap widening between us. "But remember, there's more to people than what they own." She met Steven during her sophomore year, and they married just 6 months after graduation. The wedding was more lavish than I would have preferred, with Steven's parents covering most costs after making it clear they found my budget contribution inadequate. At the reception, Steven's mother approached me with a champagne flute in hand. "Don't worry about not being able to contribute more to the wedding," she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Not everyone can afford these things. We're happy to give Amanda the celebration she deserves." I smiled tightly and thanked her, swallowing my pride. If only she knew I could have bought her husband's dealerships several times over. After the wedding, I noticed a change in Amanda. She became increasingly judgmental of my outdated lifestyle, my unfashionable clothes, and my embarrassing car. Every visit included some comment about how I should treat myself or live a little. "Mom, why don't you at least renovate the kitchen? Those cabinets are from the 90s, she said during one visit while Steven nodded in agreement. What they didn't understand was that I chose this life. I had the means to live differently, but found comfort in simplicity. More importantly, I feared what money might do to Amanda, who already seemed to be absorbing Steven's materialistic values. Little did I know that my concerns would soon be validated in ways I never imagined. The call came on a rainy Sunday afternoon in October, about 2 years ago. I was surprised to see Amanda's name on my caller ID, as we hadn't spoken in nearly a month. "Mom." Her voice had that sweet, slightly high-pitched tone she used when she wanted something. "How are you doing? I've been thinking about you so much lately." We chatted about nothing in particular for several minutes before she finally reached her point. "So, Mom, something's happened, and I wanted to talk to you about it." She paused dramatically. "Steven lost his job at the marketing firm. Budget cuts, they said, but we think his boss just didn't like him." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said sincerely. "Is he looking for something new?" "Yes, of course he has some promising leads." Another pause. "The thing is, we're having a bit of trouble with our mortgage payments on the condo. And well, I'm pregnant." My heart leaped at the news of a grandchild, momentarily overshadowing the obvious direction of this conversation. "That's wonderful news about the baby, Amanda. When are you due?" "In about 6 months. But Mom, we're really struggling financially right now. Steven's unemployment barely covers our car payments, and we have the condo mortgage, and now all these baby expenses coming up." I knew what was coming next. "We were wondering if we could maybe move in with you. Just temporarily, of course. 6 months max, just until Steven finds a new position and we save a bit of money." Despite my reservations about Steven and the gradual distance that had grown between Amanda and me, I couldn't say no to my daughter, especially not when she was expecting my grandchild. Part of me also hoped this might be an opportunity to rebuild our relationship. "Of course you can stay here," I said warmly. "The guest room is available and there's plenty of space." "Thank you so much, Mom. You're the best." Amanda's relief was palpable. "We'll be so quiet, you won't even know we're there." 2 weeks later, a moving truck pulled up in front of my house. I stood on the porch confused by the sheer volume of belongings being unloaded. "I thought you were just bringing essentials," I said as movers carried in what appeared to be a sectional sofa. "Well, we couldn't just leave everything in storage," Amanda replied, directing the movers toward the living room. "That would cost a fortune." Stephen arrived separately in his BMW, which apparently they'd decided to keep despite their financial troubles. He stepped out of the car and surveyed my home with poorly concealed disdain. "The house looks quaint," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Very retro." Within hours, it became clear that moving in meant something very different to Amanda and Stephen than it did to me. They weren't simply occupying the guest room. They were taking over my home. "Mom, we're thinking this wall between the dining room and living room should come down," Amanda announced the very next day. "It would create a much better flow for the space." "This is a load-bearing wall," I explained patiently, "and I like my house the way it is." "But it's so outdated," Stephen interjected. "No offense, Erica, but this place looks like it hasn't been updated since the Bush administration. The first Bush." "We could help you renovate," Amanda added, as if offering a favor. "Stephen's friend is a contractor. I can't afford major renovations right now," I said, using my fictional budget limitations as a shield. Stephen smirked. "Of course we understand. Not everyone has the resources for home improvements." That evening, I overheard them in the guest room. "God, I can't believe how she lives," Stephen said, his voice carrying through the thin walls. "No wonder she never wants to host holidays. This place is embarrassing." "She's just set in her ways," Amanda replied. "And you know nurses don't make that much, especially at her age." "Well, we need to make some changes if we're going to survive 6 months here. I refuse to live like this." By the end of their first week, they had rearranged my living room without permission, pushing my comfortable old armchair into a corner to make room for their oversized leather sectional. My reading nook by the window, where I'd spent countless evenings with a book and tea, was dismantled to accommodate Stephen's elaborate exercise equipment. "Mom, you need to update your style anyway." Amanda dismissed my concerns when I mentioned feeling uncomfortable with the changes. "This furniture arrangement is much more contemporary." My bookshelves were emptied of beloved novels to make space for Stephen's sports memorabilia. Family photos were relocated to less prominent positions. Even my kitchen wasn't spared. Amanda replaced my mismatched collected-over-decades dishes with their sleek matching set. "Your old plates were chipped anyway," she said when I found mine boxed up in the garage. Each small change felt like an erasure of my presence in my own home. Each dismissal of my preferences was a paper cut to my heart. But I kept quiet, telling myself it was temporary, that family harmony was worth some discomfort, that soon I would have a grandchild to dote on. I didn't realize then that these small incursions were just the beginning. A month into their stay, the power dynamics in my house shifted dramatically. Stephen appointed himself as the household financial manager despite being unemployed and living rent-free in my home. "Erica, I noticed you bought name-brand cereal," he said one morning, examining my grocery receipt that had been left on the counter. "The store brand is $3 cheaper and practically identical." "I prefer the name brand," I replied, increasingly irritated by his monitoring of my spending. "Just trying to help you manage your budget better," he said with a condescending smile. "I know things must be tight on your retirement income." Meanwhile, Amanda began establishing new house rules about noise visitors and schedules in my own home. "Mom, we need quiet after 9 p.m. because Stephen has important networking calls in the mornings," she informed me. "And could you ask Mrs. Patterson not to come over so early? Her laugh is really loud, and I need my pregnancy rest." Mrs. Patterson had been my friend for 20 years, and our weekly morning coffee dates had been a fixture in my life since retirement. Now, like so many other aspects of my routine, it was being dismantled. "Also, we've created a bathroom schedule," Amanda continued, handing me a printed chart. "Since there are 3 of us sharing, we need to be organized. The schedule allocated me 20 minutes in the bathroom each morning at 6 a.m., a full hour earlier than I usually woke up. "But I don't need to be up that early," I protested. "Steven needs the 7 a.m. slot for his workout routine, and I need the bathroom at 8 for my prenatal routine," Amanda explained, as if it were perfectly reasonable. 6 is what's left. I began to feel like a guest in my own home, and not a particularly welcome one. As Amanda's pregnancy progressed, the situation worsened. One evening, in their 3rd month staying with me, Amanda entered the living room where I was watching my favorite mystery show. "Mom, we need to talk about the sleeping arrangements." She began sitting beside me on the couch, my old couch that had been relegated to the den. "What about them?" I asked, already tense. "Well, with the baby coming, we've been discussing the best setup." She smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "The guest room isn't really big enough for us, the baby, and all the nursery furniture." "I see," I said, though I didn't see at all where this was heading. "We think it makes the most sense for us to take the master bedroom. It's larger, has its own bathroom, and would give us the space we need for a proper nursery." I stared at her in disbelief. "You want me to give up my bedroom? Where would I sleep?" "You could take the guest room, of course," she said, as if offering a generous solution. That night, I lay awake for hours, torn between maternal love and a growing sense of violation. I told myself the sacrifice was worth it for my grandchild. The next day, I began the painful process of moving out of the room I had shared with Thomas for decades, the room where I could still sometimes catch the faintest scent of his aftershave in the closet. Within a week, my bedroom was unrecognizable. My queen-sized bed, with the handmade quilt, was replaced by their king-sized one with its stark white duvet. The walls, once a soothing sage green, were repainted pale gray. The antique dresser that had belonged to my mother was moved to the garage to make room for a modern changing table. "We can donate a lot of this furniture," Steven suggested as he supervised the transformation. "It's outdated, but some charity might take it." "Those are family pieces," I protested. "I'm keeping them." He shrugged. "Suit yourself, but they're just taking up space in the garage. Not like you'll have room for them in the guest room." The guest room, now my room, was less than half the size of the master. My belongings accumulated over a lifetime had to be ruthlessly culled. Items I treasured were boxed up and stored in the increasingly crowded garage labeled as Erica's things, as if I were already gone. The loss of my private bathroom was perhaps the most difficult adjustment. After decades of having my own space, I now shared the hallway bathroom with any visitors and found evidence of Steven's presence constantly. His electric razor left on the sink wet towels on the floor, the lingering scent of his overpowering cologne. As the weeks passed, my social life dwindled. My friends stopped coming over after being subjected to Steven's not-so-subtle hints about allowing Erica some family time, or Amanda's complaints about noise disturbing her pregnancy rest. Phone calls were taken in my bedroom with the door closed, as Steven would sigh loudly or increase the television volume if I conversed in common areas. Meanwhile, their friends became regular fixtures in my home. Young professionals would fill my living room several nights a week drinking wine, though not Amanda, due to her pregnancy, talking loudly about investments and career trajectories and leaving messes I would discover the next morning. "The guys are coming over to watch the game tonight," Steven would announce, not ask. "We'll need the living room." On those evenings, I would retreat to my bedroom like a teenager grounded by strict parents. The financial exploitation began subtly. Amanda would borrow $20 here, $40 there, always with vague promises of repayment that never materialized. Steven convinced me to contribute to a baby fund they had established. "Just whatever you can afford, Erica," he said with calculated casualness. "Every little bit helps." I gave more generously than my supposed financial situation should have allowed, justifying it as an investment in my grandchild's future. The household expenses increased dramatically. My modest grocery budget tripled as Steven developed a taste for expensive steaks and imported beers. The electric bill soared with all the new electronics and Stephen's insistence on keeping the air conditioning at polar levels during summer. Water usage doubled with Amanda's long pregnancy baths and Stephen's twice-daily showers. "We'll contribute to utilities once Stephen's new job comes through," Amanda promised. The job prospects always seemed promising, but never quite materialized. My once peaceful home became a source of constant stress. I began experiencing sleep problems, waking at the slightest noise, anxious about what new changes I might discover in the morning. My blood pressure, always stable before, began rising during my regular checkups. "Everything okay at home, Erica?" my doctor asked during one visit, concerned about the numbers. "Just some temporary family stress," I assured her, not wanting to admit, even to myself, how bad things had become. I no longer felt comfortable making coffee in my own kitchen without checking if I was disturbing someone. I no longer walked freely through my own living room without a vague sense of trespassing. I no longer invited friends over without a cloud of anxiety about how they would be received. My home had ceased to be my sanctuary, and I didn't know how much more I could take. But the worst was yet to come. It happened 6 months into their stay. 2 months longer than the temporary arrangement Amanda had initially proposed. I was preparing dinner in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for a stew, when Amanda burst in with unusual excitement. "Mom, guess what? Stephen's parents are coming to visit next week. They want to see the baby preparations." I forced a smile, though the prospect of hosting Stephen's judgmental parents filled me with dread. "That's nice. When will they arrive?" "Tuesday. They'll stay until Sunday," Amanda replied, scrolling through her phone. "They're excited to see how we've set up the nursery." I nodded, mentally calculating how much extra groceries would cost and whether I needed to purchase additional towels for the guests. "So," Amanda continued, not meeting my eyes, "we need to figure out where they'll sleep." "I assumed they'd stay in a hotel," I said, continuing to chop carrots. "There's a nice one just 15 minutes away." Amanda looked up from her phone with an expression of horror. "A hotel, Mom? We can't ask them to stay in a hotel. They'd be so offended. They always host us when we visit." "Amanda, we don't have space. Your father and I designed this as a 3-bedroom house. You and Stephen have the master. I'm in the guest room, and the 3rd bedroom is your father's old office that's now being used for storage." "Actually," Amanda said, her voice taking on that wheedling quality I'd come to dread, "we were thinking they could take the guest room." I put down my knife. "And where would I sleep?" There was a pause, just long enough for me to realize I wouldn't like the answer. "Just sleep in the attic. It's only temporary, and it's not like you need anything fancy at your age." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at my daughter, this woman I had carried in my body, nurtured through childhood, sacrificed for repeatedly, and now barely recognized. "The attic isn't finished, Amanda. It's for storage. There's no proper insulation, no bathroom access without coming down to the 2nd floor, and it gets extremely hot during the day." "Mom, it's just for 5 nights, she said with exasperation. "We can put your mattress up there and it'll be fine. Stephen's parents are in their 60s. We can't ask them to climb up to an attic." "I'm 57, Amanda, not 27. The attic stairs are steep, the flooring is uneven, and there's exposed insulation." Stephen chose that moment to enter the kitchen. "What's the problem?" he asked, opening the refrigerator and taking out a beer. My beer purchased with my money. Amanda explained the situation, painting me as unreasonable for not wanting to sleep in an unfinished attic so his parents could have a comfortable stay. "Erica," Stephen said, using my first name as he always did, never Mom, or even Mrs. Miller. "My parents are doing us a huge favor, coming all this way to see the baby preparations. The least we can do is offer them a proper bedroom." "This is my house," I said quietly, feeling a rare anger rising within me. "I have been more than accommodating with you both." "Accommodating?" Amanda's voice rose. "Mom, we're family. This isn't about accommodation, it's about supporting each other. I can't believe you're being so selfish about this." "Selfish?" I echoed, nearly laughing at the absurdity. I gave you my bedroom. I've been paying for most of the groceries and all of the utilities. I've watched my home be rearranged and my belongings packed away. How exactly am I being selfish? See what I mean? Amanda turned to Stephen, ignoring my questions. She always makes everything about her. I'm pregnant, for God's sake. Look, Stephen interjected with forced patience. Let's be practical. The guest room is the only option for my parents. They're coming to see their future grandchild and have generously offered to bring several expensive baby items we need. The attic is perfectly adequate for a few nights. I looked between them, these two people who had systematically dismantled my peace, and felt something break inside me. But it wasn't my spirit. It was the chain of endless accommodation I had bound myself with. Fine, I said finally. I'll sleep in the attic. The night before Stephen's parents arrived, I carried what few possessions I had managed to keep in the guest room up the narrow attic stairs. The space was exactly as I had described, unfinished, with exposed insulation between wall studs, a single bare light bulb hanging from the center of the ceiling, and decades of boxed memories creating a labyrinth in the dusty space. Amanda and Stephen had half-heartedly cleared a corner, laying my mattress directly on the rough plywood flooring. No bed frame, no nightstand, not even a proper lamp. Just the mattress and a folded blanket. That first night in the attic, I couldn't sleep. The space was cold, the thin spring air still carrying winter's chill after sunset. The roof creaked and shifted as it cooled. Somewhere water dripped rhythmically into a bucket I'd placed months ago during a heavy rain, meaning to call a roofer, but never getting around to it. I sat up on the mattress, wrapped in the blanket, and looked around at the shadowy boxes. One had fallen open, spilling old photo albums onto the floor. I picked one up, and in the dim light from my phone, began turning pages. There was Amanda at 6, missing her front teeth, grinning wildly on the first day of school. There she was at 12, awkward and beautiful at her middle school dance. There we were together after her high school graduation, her arms around my neck, both of us laughing. What had happened to that relationship? When had her love become conditional on what I could provide? When had my home become something she felt entitled to claim? Tears slid down my cheeks as I turned page after page. Eventually, I came across an envelope tucked between the album pages. Inside was a letter from Thomas written during his final year, though neither of us knew it at the time. My dearest Erica, it began in his familiar handwriting. I read through his loving words his gratitude for our life together, his pride in the family we had built. Near the end, one passage caught in my throat. You've always been too willing to set yourself aside for others, my love. Your generosity is your beauty, and sometimes your burden. Remember to stand up for yourself and your joy. You deserve the same care you so freely give to everyone else. I clutched the letter to my chest and sobbed in that cold attic morning, not just Thomas, but the daughter I felt I had lost, and the woman I had allowed myself to become, someone whose boundaries were trampled repeatedly because I lacked the courage to enforce them. Morning came with thin light filtering through the single small window. I had dozed fitfully for perhaps 3 hours. My back ached from the uneven floor beneath the mattress, and my sinuses were irritated from the dust. As I made my way carefully down the attic stairs, I overheard Amanda and Stephen in the kitchen below. Your mom's house is actually in a pretty good neighborhood, Stephen was saying. Property values have gone up significantly here in the last few years. I know, Amanda replied, and it's way too much house for her alone. We should talk to her about selling, Stephen continued. She could get a nice little condo, something easier to maintain. And then we could use the leftover money to put a down payment on a proper house. Do you think she'd go for it? Amanda sounded doubtful. I think we can convince her. Your mom can't afford the upkeep on this place anyway. We'll do her a favor and let her live in our pool house once we sell this dump. Amanda laughed. She's pretty clueless about finances. She'd probably think 100,000 is a fortune these days. Exactly. We'll help her manage the sale proceeds, make sure she's comfortable, and everyone wins. I stood frozen on the stairs, clutching the railing. They weren't just invading my home. They were planning to take it entirely, and they assumed I was financially naive enough to let them. In that moment, something fundamental shifted within me. The hurt was still there, but now it was overshadowed by a cold clarity. I had enabled this situation through my silence and my secret. By trying to protect Amanda from wealth, I had instead allowed her to become someone who would take advantage of her own mother. It was time for things to change. That night in the attic became a turning point in my life. Unable to sleep on the hard, uneven floor, I spent hours thinking about how I had arrived at this humiliating situation. The more I reflected, the more I recognized my own role in creating it. For years, I had enabled Amanda's entitled behavior by never setting firm boundaries. I had allowed her to believe that taking advantage of me was acceptable, all under the guise of maternal love. I had maintained a secret that, while intended to protect her, had ultimately prevented us from having an honest relationship. As dawn broke, I watched dust particles dance in the thin beam of light from the attic window and made a decision. This would end now. I carefully made my way down the steep attic stairs, passing the guest room, where Stephen's parents slept soundly. Despite my resentment of the situation, I moved quietly, years of consideration for others still ingrained in my habits. In the kitchen, I made coffee and called in sick to my volunteer shift at the community garden. Then I called Sarah Johnson, my former nursing colleague, and one of the few friends who had stuck by me despite Amanda and Stephen's rudeness. "I need to talk to someone," I said when she answered. "Can I come over?" 2 hours later, I sat in Sarah's sunlit kitchen pouring out the whole story. Well, almost the whole story. I still kept my lottery win to myself instead, focusing on how Amanda and Stephen had gradually taken over my home and now planned to convince me to sell it for their benefit. "They made you sleep where—" Sarah's voice rose in outrage when I described the attic situation. "In the unfinished attic," I repeated, staring into my tea. "Amanda said it wasn't a big deal at my age." "That's elder abuse, Erica." Sarah slammed her mug down. "I don't care if she's your daughter. No one has the right to treat you this way in your own home." "Elder abuse seems a bit extreme," I said, uncomfortable with the term. "I'm only 57. "It's about the power dynamic, not just your age," Sarah insisted. "They're taking advantage of you financially, emotionally manipulating you, and now they've literally displaced you from your proper living space. My brother's a family attorney. You should talk to him." I hesitated. "I don't want to create more conflict. Amanda's pregnant and—" "Stop it," Sarah interrupted firmly. "Stop making excuses for her behavior. Being pregnant doesn't give anyone the right to mistreat others, especially not their own mother." She reached across the table and grasped my hand. "Erica, would you allow a patient to be treated this way? Would you advise them to just accept it because the person mistreating them is family?" Put that way, the answer was obvious. No, of course not. "Then why accept it for yourself?" She squeezed my hand. "My brother Jack can see you this afternoon. No charge, just a consultation. Will you go?" 3 hours later, I sat in Jack Johnson's office, surrounded by law books and family photos. He was a kind-faced man in his early 60s who listened carefully as I described my situation. "Mrs. Miller, what you're describing is a clear violation of your rights as a homeowner," he said when I finished. "Whether they're family or not, you have legal recourse to reclaim your space." "I don't want to evict my pregnant daughter," I clarified quickly. "I just want boundaries respected." "Understanding your legal rights doesn't mean you have to exercise them fully," Jack explained. "But knowing them gives you leverage in conversations about boundaries." He handed me a folder of information. These are your rights as a homeowner in our state. Review them, and we can discuss specific strategies." As I left his office, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sorrow that legal knowledge was necessary in dealing with my own daughter, but also a growing sense of empowerment. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I felt I had options beyond silent endurance. My next stop was to see Robert Winters, my financial advisor. I hadn't consulted him about anything beyond routine investment matters since setting up my accounts after the lottery win. Now I needed his help for something more personal. "Erica, good to see you." Robert greeted me warmly in his downtown office. "What can I help you with today?" "I need documentation of my financial situation," I explained. "Comprehensive documentation that clearly shows my assets, investments, and overall net worth." Robert raised an eyebrow. "May I ask why you've always been extremely private about your finances?" I took a deep breath and explained the situation with Amanda and Stephen, including their plan to convince me to sell my house. I also shared my decision to finally reveal my financial status. "I see." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "Well, the good news is your investments have performed exceptionally well. Your $14 million has grown to nearly $20 million over these 8 years. He spent the next hour preparing detailed financial statements, explaining each document carefully. These clearly show your assets, the growth over time, and your current financial status. No one looking at these could possibly think you need financial help from anyone. My final stop that day was perhaps the most difficult, a session with Dr. Eleanor Patel, a therapist I had seen briefly after Thomas died. I hadn't visited her office in years, but I needed objective guidance for the confrontation I was planning. "The most important thing to remember," Dr. Patel advised after hearing my story, "is that healthy boundaries are not punishment. They're necessary for healthy relationships." "I'm afraid Amanda will cut me off completely," I admitted, voicing my deepest fear. "That I'll never see my grandchild." "That's a legitimate concern," Dr. Patel acknowledged. "But ask yourself this: what kind of relationship do you have now? Is it loving and mutual, or is it based on exploitation and disrespect?" The answer was painful but clear. "Setting boundaries might strain your relationship temporarily," she continued, "but not setting them guarantees continued mistreatment. Which can you live with long term?" I left her office with practical strategies for the conversation ahead and the emotional preparation I needed for potential backlash. For the first time in months, I felt I was reclaiming my power. That evening, I returned home to find Stephen's parents cooing over nursery furniture in what used to be my bedroom. They barely acknowledged my presence, too absorbed in their excitement about the coming grandchild. I slipped upstairs to the attic, no longer as devastated by the arrangement now that I had a plan. Sitting on my mattress on the floor, I sent a text to Sarah confirming she could join me for dinner the following evening as a supportive presence. Then I began mentally rehearsing what I would say to Amanda and Stephen, drawing on all the advice I'd received that day. The old Erica would have continued sacrificing her comfort, dignity, and home out of misguided maternal love. But as I looked around the dusty attic where my own daughter had exiled me, I knew that woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who understood that true love doesn't enable harmful behavior. It establishes the boundaries necessary for mutual respect. Tomorrow would change everything, and I was finally ready. The next day, I waited until Stephen's parents left for their afternoon exploration of the neighborhood, which I knew meant critiquing houses and comparing them unfavorably to their own. With a few hours of privacy ahead, I began implementing my plan. First, I called a local cleaning service I had used occasionally for deep cleaning, asking if they could send someone immediately for an emergency job. It was an extravagance I would never have permitted myself before, but today was different. Today, I was reclaiming my home. While waiting for the cleaners, I went to the grocery store and selected ingredients for an elegant dinner: filet mignon, fresh asparagus, fingerling potatoes, and a chocolate soufflé dessert. I added 2 bottles of good wine to my cart, one red for dinner and a champagne to make my point. The total at checkout was more than I would typically spend on a week of groceries, but I paid without hesitation. When I returned home, the cleaning team had already transformed the main floor. Surfaces gleamed, floors shone, and the lingering scent of lemon polish had replaced the stale air. I tipped them generously and began preparing the dining room. I retrieved my grandmother's lace tablecloth from a box in the garage, along with the good china and crystal glasses that had been wedding gifts. Each item I reclaimed from storage felt like recovering a piece of myself. By late afternoon, the dining room looked like a setting from a luxury restaurant, complete with tapered candles and fresh flowers. At precisely 5:30, Sarah arrived, her presence both moral support and strategic advantage. "The table looks beautiful," she commented, helping me arrange the final details. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," I admitted, "but certain." We heard the front door open and Amanda's voice calling out, "Mom, what's that smell? Are you cooking?" "In the dining room?" I responded, straightening my shoulders. Amanda waddled in, 7 months pregnant and looking tired. Behind her, Stephen appeared, immediately noticing the elaborate table setting. "What's the occasion?" he asked suspiciously. "We can't afford fancy dinners." "Please sit down," I said calmly, gesturing to the chairs. "Sarah's joining us for dinner, and we have something important to discuss." "Mom, you should have asked us before inviting guests," Amanda began, but stopped when she saw my expression. Once they were seated, visibly confused by the formal setting and Sarah's presence, I served the meal I had prepared. Throughout the first course, I kept conversation light, asking about their day and commenting on the weather. Stephen, never one to resist free food, ate heartily while shooting questioning glances at Sarah. As I cleared the first course dishes, Amanda finally broke. "Mom, what's going on? Why the fancy dinner, and why is Sarah here?" I took a deep breath, returned to my seat, and folded my hands on the table. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since I was moved to the attic," I began, my voice steady. "About our relationship, this living arrangement, and some decisions I made years ago that have affected us all." I reached beside me for the folder Robert had prepared and placed it on the table. "Before I continue, there's something you should know." I slid a lottery ticket verification document across to them. 8 years ago, I won the lottery, $14 million after taxes. The silence that followed was absolute. Amanda's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Stephen's face went from disbelief to calculation so quickly it would have been comical in another context. "That's impossible," Amanda finally sputtered. "You've been living like this." She gestured around at what she perceived as my modest home. "You kept working. You drive a 10-year-old car." "I chose to live simply," I explained. "I paid off this house, invested wisely, and continued the life that makes me happy. I kept it secret because I've seen what sudden wealth does to people and relationships." I removed more documents from the folder. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds. My initial $14 million has grown to nearly $20 million now. This house is fully paid for, and in my name only. I have no debts, excellent health insurance, and financial security beyond what most people can imagine. Stephen reached for the documents, his expression changing from shock to intense interest as he scanned the numbers. "This is extraordinary." He managed, clearly recalculating everything he thought he knew about me. "Mom, I don't understand," Amanda said, tears forming in her eyes. "Why would you keep this from me? Why would you let us struggle when you had all this money?" "That's a fair question," I acknowledged. "I kept it secret initially because I wanted to protect you from the negative aspects of sudden wealth. I've seen lottery winners' lives destroyed by the changes money brings. Later, as you and Stephen established your lifestyle of expensive tastes and constant upgrades, I worried what knowing about my money would do to your values and our relationship." I looked directly at her. But I've realized my secrecy had unintended consequences. It created a situation where you felt entitled to take over my home because you believed I couldn't afford better. It led to disrespect that culminated in my sleeping in an unfinished attic while you plotted to convince me to sell my house for your benefit. Amanda had the grace to look ashamed at this, but Stephen quickly recovered his composure. Erica, this changes everything. With your resources, we could help you invest in a beautiful retirement property. Something easier to maintain than this old house. I overheard your conversation yesterday morning, I interrupted calmly, about convincing me to sell this dump so you could use the proceeds for a down payment on your own house with me relegated to your pool house. Stephen's face flushed dark red. Amanda looked between us in confusion. What conversation? The one where your husband said I was clueless about finances and you laughed in agreement, I replied evenly. The one where you planned to help yourselves to the proceeds from selling my home. Mom, it wasn't like that, Amanda protested weakly. It was exactly like that, I countered. And it was the culmination of months of increasing disrespect and entitlement in my home. I turned to include Sarah in my gaze. With the help of good friends and professional advisors, I've gained clarity about this situation and what needs to change. I removed a final document from the folder, the notice Jack had prepared. This is a formal written notice giving you 30 days to find alternative housing. I've spoken with a family attorney who assures me this is more than generous given the circumstances. You're evicting us. Amanda's voice rose to a shocked squeak. I'm pregnant. I'm giving you notice to find your own housing with ample time to do so, I corrected. Your pregnancy doesn't entitle you to take over my home or treat me with disrespect. But where will we go? We can't afford. I cut her off. That's no longer my concern. You have 2 educated adults in your household, and now you have accurate information about my financial situation. I will not be manipulated by financial guilt anymore. Stephen, always quick to adapt when advantage was at stake, leaned forward with an unctuous smile. Erica, we had no idea about your situation. Of course, we've been under stress with the baby coming, and perhaps we haven't been as considerate as we should have been. But we're family. Surely we can work this out without legal notices. We can absolutely work things out, I agreed. But only with clear boundaries in place. This notice establishes those boundaries. I poured champagne for myself and Sarah, then continued. Tonight, I'll be reclaiming my bedroom. You have until tomorrow evening to move your belongings to the guest room or make other arrangements. Additionally, I've changed the Wi-Fi password and garage door code. You'll find the new ones in this envelope along with a written list of house rules for the remainder of your stay. Amanda began crying in earnest now. I can't believe you're doing this to us, to your own daughter and grandchild. What I'm doing, I said firmly, is establishing the boundaries I should have set months ago. What you choose to do in response will determine our relationship going forward. I raised my glass in a toast. To honesty, boundaries, and fresh starts. Sarah clinked her glass against mine, her presence a solid reminder that I wasn't alone. Stephen stared at the financial documents, clearly running calculations in his head. Amanda continued crying, one hand protectively over her pregnant belly. The evening ended with Amanda and Stephen retreating to the guest room without finishing dinner, the sound of furious whispers following them up the stairs. Sarah helped me clear the dishes, gave me a supportive hug, and left with a promise to check in tomorrow. Alone in the quiet house, I carried my suitcase from the attic to the master bedroom, removed the king-sized bed Amanda and Stephen had installed, and arranged for it to be collected by a charity the next day. From the garage, I retrieved my queen-sized bed and with considerable effort reassembled it in its rightful place. As I made the bed with fresh sheets and my favorite quilt, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The confrontation had been difficult but necessary. For the first time in months, I would sleep in my own bed, in my own room, without apology or guilt. Whatever happened next would be challenging, but I was no longer the woman who would silently accept disrespect in the name of maternal love. That woman, had been left behind in the attic, along with the dust and shadows of a life too long lived in accommodation of others' demands. The morning after my revelation brought a tense silence to the house. Amanda and Stephen remained in the guest room until nearly noon, emerging only when hunger finally drove them downstairs. I was sitting at the kitchen table calmly drinking tea and reading a book I hadn't touched in months. "Good morning," I said pleasantly, not looking up from my page. Neither responded verbally, though Stephen made a point of noisily preparing coffee, slamming cupboard doors and drawers as if their contents had personally offended him. "Your things have been moved to the guest room," I informed them, still calm. "The master bedroom is no longer available to you." "We noticed," Amanda said bitterly, lowering herself into a chair across from me. Her eyes were puffy from crying, her hair uncombed. "Mom, can we please talk about this?" I marked my place in the book and set it aside. "I'm listening." "This is all so sudden," she began, her voice wavering. "One day you're sleeping in the attic to accommodate us, and the next you're threatening eviction and revealing you've been secretly wealthy for years." "It may seem sudden to you," I acknowledged, "but from my perspective, this has been building for months. The attic incident was simply the final straw that made me reassess our entire relationship." Stephen joined us at the table, his expression carefully composed into what I recognized as his negotiation face, the same one he'd used when trying to convince me to finance a small business opportunity 3 months earlier. "Erica," he began smoothly, "we clearly got off on the wrong foot here. Obviously, had we known about your financial situation, we would have approached things very differently." "That's precisely the problem," I replied. "Your treatment of me shouldn't have depended on my perceived financial status. Basic respect isn't contingent on wealth." "Of course not," he backpedaled quickly. "What I mean is, we've all been under stress. Amanda's pregnancy, my job situation, the cramped living conditions. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed. The things you said about selling my house and relegating me to your pool house seemed quite sincere," I observed, as did Amanda's assertion that I should sleep in an unfinished attic because I don't need anything fancy at my age. Amanda flushed. "I was frustrated, Mom. I didn't mean it like it sounded." "I think you did," I said quietly. "And that's what hurts the most. Somewhere along the way, you became someone who could treat your own mother with such callous disregard." "So you're punishing us now?" Amanda's voice took on a familiar whining quality. "Kicking out your pregnant daughter." "I'm setting boundaries, not punishing you," I corrected. "There's a significant difference. You have 30 days to find suitable housing, which is more than generous given your behavior. I'm even willing to help you with the security deposit on an apartment as a one-time gift, not a loan, to ease the transition." Stephen perked up at the mention of financial assistance. "That's very generous, Erica. Perhaps we could discuss a more comprehensive approach to helping us get established. With the baby coming, we'll need—" "The security deposit is my only offer," I interrupted firmly. "How you manage your finances beyond that is your responsibility as adults." "But Mom, you have $20 million, Amanda protested. "You could help us buy a house outright and never even miss the money." "I could." I agreed. "But I won't. Not now, not with how you've behaved, not with how quickly your attitude changed the moment you learned about my wealth." The conversation continued in this vein for nearly an hour, them alternating between guilt trips, anger, and attempts at manipulation, me calmly maintaining my boundaries. Eventually, Stephen stormed out, slamming the front door hard enough to rattle the windows. Amanda retreated to the guest room in tears. Later that afternoon, I heard them arguing behind the closed guest room door. Though I couldn't make out specific words, the tone suggested disagreement about how to proceed. By evening, Stephen had returned with takeout food that they ate in their room, avoiding further interaction with me. The next 2 weeks established a new pattern in the house. Amanda vacillated between icy silence and tearful attempts to make me feel guilty about abandoning her during pregnancy. Stephen adopted a solicitous, almost sycophantic attitude, complimenting my cooking offering to carry groceries and making transparent attempts to discuss investment opportunities he'd been considering. I remained cordial but firm, refusing to engage with either manipulation tactic. Meanwhile, I reclaimed my home bit by bit, returning my books to the shelves, repositioning my furniture, rehanging my family photos. Each act felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. 17 days after my revelation, nearly 2 weeks before their notice period ended, I returned from grocery shopping to find a flurry of activity. A small moving truck was parked in the driveway, and Stephen was directing movers carrying out their sectional sofa. "You're moving today?" I asked, surprised by the sudden development. "Stephen's parents bought us a condo," Amanda explained, appearing in the doorway. "A baby gift, they said, though the timing is obviously connected to your eviction notice." "I see," I replied neutrally. "That's good news for everyone then." The move proceeded efficiently, with Stephen's parents arriving to supervise. They treated me with cold politeness, clearly having heard a version of events that cast me as the villain. I didn't bother correcting their assumptions. By sunset, the house was mine again. I walked through each room, noting the damage that would need repair. Walls scuffed from careless furniture, moving carpet stains never reported a cracked bathroom tile. Yet despite these imperfections, the space felt lighter, as if the very air had cleared with their departure. Amanda left without a proper goodbye, slipping out while I was in the backyard. Stephen, ever the pragmatist, approached me with a business card as the last boxes were being loaded. "My cell number's on the back," he said, handing me the card. "In case you change your mind about helping with the baby expenses, or if you're considering any investment opportunities." I took the card without comment and watched them drive away, feeling a complex mixture of sadness, relief, and something else I couldn't immediately identify. Later, sitting in my reclaimed reading nook with a cup of tea, I recognized it as freedom. The lightness of having finally released a burden I'd carried too long. The burden hadn't been Amanda or even the financial secrets. It had been my own willingness to accept mistreatment in the name of love. In forcing me to sleep in the attic, Amanda had inadvertently forced me to wake up to how unhealthy our relationship had become. That night, I slept peacefully in my own bed for the first time in months, with no whispered criticisms floating through the walls. No need to tiptoe around my own home, and no dread about what new incursion on my space the next day might bring. It was the best sleep I'd had in years. 6 months passed with minimal contact from Amanda. She sent a terse text when my grandson Jacob was born with a single photo and no invitation to visit. I responded warmly, expressing my joy and offering to help whenever they were ready. The message went unanswered. Stephen called twice, once to subtly inquire about the possibility of a baby account I might want to establish, and once to float an investment opportunity in a friend's startup. I declined both overtures politely but firmly. The estrangement was painful, but I used the time to rebuild my life in ways I hadn't expected. With Sarah's encouragement, I joined a support group for parents experiencing family estrangement. There, I met others navigating similar painful terrain, including Eleanor, a retired teacher whose son hadn't spoken to her in 5 years over a perceived slight to his wife. "The hardest part," Eleanor told me during one meeting, "is accepting that you can't control their response. You can only control your own boundaries and behavior." Those words became my mantra during difficult moments when I'd find myself reaching for the phone to call Amanda, ready to apologize just to end the silence. Instead, I focused on creating a life that honored my own needs and values. For the first time, I began using my wealth in ways that brought me genuine joy. I established a small foundation providing emergency financial assistance to nurses facing hardship, something I'd seen too often during my career. I renovated my home not to impress others, but to create the comfortable, beautiful space I'd always wanted. I traveled to places I'd only dreamed of, sometimes with Sarah and other new friends, sometimes alone. I also sought therapy with Dr. Patel, working through the guilt I still carried about my lottery secrecy and my role in enabling Amanda's entitled behavior. Gradually, I came to understand that while keeping the lottery win secret had been a mistake, the breakdown in our relationship had deeper roots. Money doesn't create character flaws, Dr. Patel observed during one session. It simply magnifies what's already there. The same is true of its absence. 4 months after Jacob's birth, I received an unexpected text from Amanda. Jacob has colic. Nothing works. I haven't slept in 3 days. Stephen's useless. I don't know what to do. No greeting, no pleasantries, just raw desperation. I recognized it immediately from my own early days of motherhood. That overwhelming feeling that you're failing at the most important job in the world. I responded immediately. I can be there in 30 minutes if you want. No strings attached. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, please. When I arrived at their condo, a sleek modern unit in an upscale development, Amanda opened the door looking like a ghost of herself. Hair unwashed, dark circles under her eyes, wearing a bathrobe stained with what appeared to be every bodily fluid a baby can produce. In her arms, Jacob wailed inconsolably, his tiny face red with effort. Without a word, I gently took him from her. Drawing on long dormant skills from my nursing days and my own experience with Amanda's colic, I positioned him against my shoulder in a specific hold and began a gentle bouncing motion while walking slowly around the room. Go shower, I instructed Amanda quietly. Take 20 minutes for yourself. I've got him. She hesitated, then nodded and disappeared down the hallway. By the time she returned, hair wet, but eyes clearer, Jacob had settled into whimpering rather than full-throated screaming. How did you do that? She asked, sinking onto the sofa. Practice, I replied, continuing my methodical movement. And this specific hold helps with gas pressure. You are exactly the same at this age. Over the next few hours, I showed Amanda several techniques for soothing Jacob, prepared a simple meal that she devoured as if she hadn't eaten in days, and loaded their dishwasher without comment on the mountain of unwashed dishes. As I prepared to leave, Amanda finally addressed the elephant in the room. Why did you come? After everything? I looked at my daughter, exhausted, vulnerable, and for the first time in years, genuine. Because you're still my daughter, and he's my grandson. Setting boundaries doesn't mean I stopped loving you. She nodded, tears forming. I was horrible to you. We both were. Yes, I agreed simply. You were. I don't know if I can fix that, she admitted. Neither do I said honestly. But maybe we can start by trying to build something new instead of fixing what broke. That visit became the first tentative step toward reconciliation. I began coming over twice weekly to help with Jacob, giving Amanda desperately needed breaks. Our conversations were initially limited to baby care and practical matters, gradually expanding to include more personal topics as trust slowly rebuilt. Stephen remained distant, clearly disappointed that my financial support hadn't materialized as he'd hoped. I learned from Amanda that his parents' gift of the condo came with strings attached. They held the deed and made it clear their generosity depended on Stephen working in his father's business. 3 months into our cautious reconnection, Amanda asked if we could try family therapy. I want to understand how things went so wrong, she explained. And I don't want Jacob growing up in a family with these kinds of patterns. We began weekly sessions with Dr. Martinez, a family therapist, who specialized in healing estrangement. The process was painful, with sessions often ending in tears or frustrated silence. Old wounds were reopened, examined, and gradually cleaned of their infection. I felt invisible in my own home, I explained during one particularly difficult session. Like I had no value beyond what I could provide. I felt judged for wanting more than you had, Amanda countered. Like my ambitions were somehow a rejection of you. Slowly, painfully, we began to understand the miscommunications and unspoken expectations that had poisoned our relationship long before the attic incident. My lottery secrecy had played a role, but it wasn't the root cause. Both of you created a relationship where authentic communication felt unsafe, Dr. Martinez observed. Erica by hiding significant aspects of her life, Amanda by responding to differences with judgment rather than curiosity. A full year after the confrontation dinner, Amanda invited me to Jacob's first birthday party, a small gathering at their condo. Stephen was cordial but distant, his parents coolly polite. But watching Amanda confidently managing motherhood, seeing Jacob's delighted recognition when I arrived, I felt profound gratitude for the difficult journey we'd traveled. That evening, after the other guests had left, Amanda and I sat on their balcony watching the sunset while Jacob slept inside. "I've been thinking about what you said that night," Amanda said suddenly. "About how your treatment shouldn't depend on your financial status. You were right." I waited, giving her space to continue. "When I found out about the money, I was so angry at first. I felt betrayed. But later I realized I was really angry at myself." She looked at me directly. "Because deep down, I knew how we'd been treating you, was wrong lottery or no lottery." "We both made mistakes," I acknowledged. "I should have been honest about my financial situation from the beginning." "Maybe," she agreed, "but that didn't give us the right to take over your home or make you sleep in the attic." She shook her head. "God, I still can't believe we did that. Being forced to sleep in the attic turned out to be one of the best things that happened to me," I said thoughtfully. "It forced me to wake up to patterns I'd been accepting for too long." "Is that why you created the foundation for nurses?" Amanda asked. "As part of that awakening," I nodded. "That and remembering why I became a nurse in the first place, to help people during difficult times. Money revealed character, both mine and others, but it wasn't the real problem. Learning to live authentically and maintain healthy boundaries was the real challenge." We sat in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky. Our relationship wasn't fully healed. Perhaps it never would be completely. Stephen remained a complication, his thinly veiled interest in my wealth, a constant reminder of past conflicts. Amanda and I still occasionally fell into old patterns during moments of stress. But we were trying, learning, growing. The woman who had once been exiled to the attic had found her voice and her boundaries. The daughter who had once ordered her mother into that attic was learning humility and respect. And between us, Jacob represented the possibility of breaking generational patterns and creating something healthier. Being forced to sleep in the attic had awakened me to truths I'd been avoiding for years. In the dusty darkness of that space, surrounded by forgotten memories, I had found something precious, the courage to stand up for myself, and the wisdom to recognize that true love requires both compassion and boundaries. As I watch my grandson grow, I'm reminded daily that our greatest pain often leads to our most important growth. The fortune I kept hidden for years turned out to be far less valuable than the self-respect I finally claimed. In the end, that was the real lottery win. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories of challenge and transformation. Remember, sometimes the darkest moments in our lives are just the beginning of a powerful new chapter. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to stand up for yourself when needed, even when it's difficult.